Some people think the hardest thing about leaving home is packing your clothes. They're wrong. The hardest part is walking, away from people who have convinced you that your entire existence belongs to them. I didn't leave because I hated my family. I left because one morning I looked in the bathroom mirror and realized I couldn't remember the last decision I'd made that was truly mine. And somehow, that tiny realization ended up costing everyone far more than they ever imagined. Before I tell you how every electricity bill, mortgage payment, insurance notice, and overdue letter eventually found its way into their trembling hands, you need to understand what kind of house I grew up in. Because from the outside, it looked like the happiest home on our street. People in our neighborhood often called us the perfect family. Sunday dinners, birthday parties, matching Christmas pajamas, barbecues every summer. My mother, Gloria, smiled so often that strangers believed kindness flowed naturally through her. My father, Samuel, shook everyone's hand with the confidence of a respected church elder. My younger brother, Brian, was charming enough to make teachers overlook his laziness. My sister, Vanessa, always knew exactly what to say to impress relatives. And then there was me, Amara, the dependable one. If someone forgot groceries, ask Amara. If someone's car broke down, Amara will figure it out. If Dad needed paperwork completed, if Mom had another headache, if Brian needed money, if Vanessa wanted someone to babysit, everyone knew the answer before the question finished. Me. It wasn't because I was the oldest. It was because somewhere along the line, responsibility quietly attached itself to my name. No one noticed. Least of all me. I worked as a project coordinator for a construction company downtown. Nothing glamorous, but the salary was steady. The benefits were good, and I genuinely enjoyed solving problems. My coworkers often joked that I could organize chaos itself. If only they knew. Every evening after work, while they went home to rest, I went to my second full-time job, being everyone's unpaid caretaker. Mom would hand me grocery lists before I even removed my shoes. Dad wanted help managing his pension documents. Brian needed fuel money. Vanessa needed someone to collect her son from daycare because she had plans. Those plans usually involved expensive restaurants she somehow could afford despite constantly borrowing from everyone. Meanwhile, I ate leftovers. Again, one Friday evening, after spending nearly 2 hours in traffic, I finally parked outside the family home. Before I could switch off the engine, my phone rang. Mom, where are you? I'm outside. Good, hurry inside. Your uncle's family is here. I smiled. I didn't know they were visiting. You weren't supposed to know. Now stop talking and come help. The call ended. Not goodbye, not drive safely, just instructions.
I sat there another minute, listening to the engine cool. For the first time, I didn't immediately rush inside. Something about that silence felt peaceful. Too peaceful. Inside, laughter echoed through the living room. The smell of roasted chicken drifted through the hallway. Children chased one another between chairs. Everyone looked happy, until they saw me. There she is. My aunt waved. Now dinner can finally start. I forced a smile. Nobody asked if I'd eaten. Nobody asked how work went. Instead, Mom appeared carrying 3 serving bowls. Take these. Dad called from across the room. After dinner, I need you to check something on my laptop. Brian interrupted. And I need $20. Vanessa laughed. You still owe me a ride tomorrow. Not one person paused long enough to realize they had all spoken at once. Request after request. Demand after demand. As if I wasn't a daughter. I was customer service. That night, after everyone left, I found unopened envelopes stacked neatly on the dining table. Electricity, water, internet, insurance, mortgage, all unpaid. I looked toward the living room. Dad was watching television. Mom was scrolling through recipes. Brian played video games. Vanessa talked loudly on speakerphone about booking a weekend resort. I quietly paid the bills online. Again, no one noticed. 3 months later, my manager called me into his office. I've got good news. I assumed another project assignment. Instead, he slid an envelope across the desk. We're promoting you. I stared. He continued smiling. You've earned it. Inside was a substantial salary increase, a housing allowance, and a relocation package. The company wanted me to oversee operations in another city, only 2 hours away, close enough to visit, far enough to finally build my own life. For the first time in years, the future felt exciting. I couldn't wait to tell my family. I honestly believed they'd celebrate with me. I had no idea that announcement would expose everything. Dinner that evening was unusually quiet. Everyone seemed distracted. Perfect. I have some news. Dad barely looked up. What is it? I got promoted. Mom smiled politely. Oh, that's nice. Brian continued eating. Vanessa checked her phone. I laughed awkwardly. And the company is offering me an apartment. Silence. Then forks stopped moving. Dad slowly lowered his glass. What apartment? In Riverside. Mom frowned. Why would you need an apartment? Because I'll be working there. You'll commute? It's over 2 hours. So? I blinked. I thought, maybe it's time I had my own place. The room changed instantly, like someone had switched off the lights. Mom was the first to speak. You can't be serious. I am. Dad folded his hands. So you're abandoning your family? I didn't say that. Brian scoffed. You think you're too good for us now? Vanessa laughed.
I knew this promotion would get to her head. I stared around the table. Why is everyone angry? Mom's voice sharpened. Because families stay together. I'll still visit. Visit? She almost shouted the word. Visit? As though I had announced I was moving to another planet. The conversation spiraled for nearly an hour. Dad reminded me how much they'd sacrificed. Mom cried. Brian accused me of selfishness. Vanessa quietly whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. I always knew she'd leave once she made enough money. That sentence hurt more than everything else. Because it wasn't true. I'd stayed far longer than I wanted. Out of love. Out of guilt. Out of obligation. Not because anyone asked me to. Because everyone expected me to. There's a difference. For the next 2 weeks, the house became unbearably tense. Nobody spoke unless they needed something. Ironically, they still expected me to cook. To clean. To pay. To drive. To fix. To organize. It was as if they hoped exhausting me would make me change my mind. Instead, it made me more certain. The apartment wasn't luxurious. A modest 2-bedroom unit overlooking a small park. Fresh white walls. A tiny balcony. A kitchen barely large enough for 2 people. But when I walked through it for the first time, I cried. Not because it was beautiful. Because it was quiet. No shouting. No demands. No television blaring. No one calling my name every 5 minutes. Just silence. The kind that allows a person to hear their own thoughts again. I signed the lease immediately. Moving day arrived on a bright Saturday morning. I intentionally chose early hours, hoping to avoid drama. I was wrong. The moment Brian saw the moving boxes, he laughed. So you're actually doing this? Yes. Vanessa crossed her arms. Don't expect us to help. I didn't ask. Mom stood in the hallway with tears already forming. So after everything we've done, I gently interrupted. I appreciate everything you've done. But, she folded her arms, I also deserve to live my own life. Dad finally appeared from his bedroom. His face carried the disappointed expression he reserved for people who had failed him. If you walk out today, he paused, don't expect this house to welcome you back. The words landed like stones. I looked around slowly. The family photographs, the staircase where I'd sat studying as a teenager, the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, the living room where every celebration somehow became another responsibility. I realized something unexpected. This had stopped feeling like home a long time ago. Only my body had remained. Without arguing, I picked up my suitcase, rolled it toward the front door, opened it. Sunlight poured across the entrance. Behind me, voices rose. Mom pleading, Brian mocking, Vanessa muttering insults, Dad standing silent. None of them asked the one question that mattered. Are you happy? Not one, because deep down, they already knew the answer. I stepped outside, closed the door gently behind me, and for the first time in almost 33 years, I belonged to myself, or so I thought. Because less than 48 hours later, my phone rang. Not once, not twice. 23 missed calls, 7 voice messages, and 1 text from my father that made my stomach tighten before I even opened it. Come home immediately. We have a serious problem, and it's all because you left. My father's message stayed on my screen for almost a minute before I replied. What happened? The answer came almost instantly. Stop texting. Just come. I stared at the phone. For years, those words would have been enough. I would have grabbed my keys, canceled my plans, and rushed back without asking another question. This time I didn't. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea, sat on my tiny balcony overlooking the park, and watched children ride their bicycles while the evening breeze carried the smell of fresh rain. It wasn't that I didn't care. I was simply learning a lesson that most people never realize until much later in life. Someone else's emergency does not automatically become your responsibility, especially when they've spent years treating your kindness like an obligation. The phone rang again. "Mom," I answered. Her voice was frantic. "Amara, where are you?" "At home." "No, you're not. You're at that apartment. That apartment is my home now." There was a pause. It was subtle, but I heard it. She wasn't upset because I had moved. She was upset because I had stopped thinking of their house first. "Your father needs you." "What happened?" "The electricity was disconnected." I frowned. "What?" "The power company came this morning." My mind raced. "Didn't they receive the payment?" Silence. Then she whispered something that completely changed the conversation. "We thought you had already paid it." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Not because the power was out. Because nobody even knew who had been paying the bills all those years. They had simply assumed everything magically took care of itself. I closed my eyes. "No, Mom." "What do you mean?" "I stopped paying the bills after I moved." "You've always paid them." "I know." Another long silence. Then her voice became defensive. "You could have warned us." I almost laughed. "I've been telling everyone for weeks that I was leaving." "That's different." "No," I said quietly. "It really isn't." I drove over the next morning. Not because I had been ordered to, because I wanted closure. The moment I walked inside, the atmosphere felt different. No television, no lights, no humming refrigerator. The house that had always been so loud suddenly felt strangely empty. Dad sat at the dining table surrounded by unopened envelopes. The same envelopes I had quietly handled for years. Water, gas, internet, property tax, insurance, maintenance, mortgage. He looked older than he had just 3 days earlier. "So," he began, "these are all due." I nodded. "I can see that." He cleared his throat. I didn't realize. His words disappeared. For perhaps the first time in my life, my father didn't know what to say. Mom finally spoke. "We never asked you to pay everything." I looked at her gently. "No, you volunteered." "Did I?" She hesitated. I stood and walked toward the kitchen. The cupboard doors squeaked exactly the way they always had. I poured myself a glass of water before returning. Then I quietly asked, "When was the last time anyone else paid the internet bill?" Nobody answered. "When was the last time Brian bought groceries?" Silence. "When was the last time Vanessa paid for daycare without borrowing money?" Nothing. I turned toward Dad. "When was the last time you looked at the mortgage statement?" He slowly lowered his eyes. That was answer enough. For years, no one had intended to exploit me. That realization surprised even me. It had happened gradually. 1 favor became 2. 2 became 10. 10 became routine. Routine became expectation. Expectation became entitlement. None of them had noticed. Neither had I. Until I left. Brian broke the silence first. "So what now?" I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You've got the better job. You've got the apartment. You should help." There it was. The old script, except it no longer fit. "I'll help you understand the bills." I smiled politely. "But I'm not taking them back." His face twisted. "So you're abandoning us?" "No. I'm allowing everyone to carry their own share." The following weeks were uncomfortable for everyone. Brian finally accepted overtime shifts he'd spent years avoiding. Vanessa canceled luxury weekends and learned to budget. Dad met with a financial advisor. Mom started a small catering, business she'd talked about for nearly 15 years but never believed she could build. Something unexpected happened. Without me doing everything, everyone slowly became stronger. One Saturday afternoon, Mom called. This time her voice sounded different. Calmer. "Would you come for dinner?" There was no urgency, no hidden request, just an invitation. I accepted. When I arrived, something immediately caught my attention. Brian was seasoning chicken in the kitchen. Vanessa was washing dishes. Dad was fixing a loose cabinet door. Mom laughed as she rolled out fresh dough. Nobody shouted my name. Nobody handed me a list. Nobody asked for my wallet. For a moment, I simply stood there, watching. It felt like walking into a family I'd always hoped existed. Dinner was quiet. Not awkward, peaceful. Halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." Everyone looked at him. I confused your kindness with duty. His voice shook. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my daughter. I started seeing you as the person who solved every problem. The room fell silent. I was wrong. Those 3 words carried more weight than any speech he could have given. Mom reached across the table. I was afraid. I looked at her. Afraid of what? She smiled sadly. That if you left, you'd realize you didn't need us. I squeezed her hand. I never stopped needing my family. I just needed my own life too. Tears filled her eyes. There is a difference. Brian looked embarrassed. I guess, he muttered. I got comfortable. Vanessa laughed softly. So did I. Then she looked directly at me. I thought love meant you'd always rescue us. I smiled. Love isn't rescuing people forever. It's helping them become capable without you. Months passed. Mom's catering business became surprisingly successful. Dad finally retired without constant financial stress. Brian saved enough money to rent his own apartment. Vanessa completed a bookkeeping course and found a stable job. Ironically, the family functioned. Better after everyone started carrying their own responsibilities. Not because I abandoned them. Because I finally stopped preventing them from growing. One evening, nearly a year after I moved out, Dad visited my apartment. He walked onto the balcony and admired the sunset. You've built a beautiful life. I smiled. I've been trying. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Not money, not paperwork, just one sentence. Thank you for leaving when you did. I looked at him in confusion. He continued. If you had stayed, we would have kept taking, and none of us would have become the people we are now. For the first time since childhood, I hugged my father without carrying the invisible weight of everyone else's expectations. It felt lighter than I imagined. People often ask whether moving out destroyed my family. The truth is, it saved us. Distance forced honesty. Responsibility created respect. Boundaries restored love. Sometimes the greatest act of kindness isn't saying yes one more time. Sometimes it's having the courage to say, you can do this without me. Because real love isn't measured by how much of yourself you sacrifice. It's measured by whether the people you love become stronger. Not more dependent, because you were in their lives. If this story made you see family, responsibility, or boundaries in a different way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sometimes the hardest door to walk through is the one leading toward your own future. But it can also be the one that changes everyone for the better.